Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Phillip Brown. He's a public historian, author, and educator, renowned for his fervent exploration and dissemination of the rich history of the Merrimack Valley in Massachusetts. He has dedicated his career in uncovering and illuminating the often overlooked stories of American history. Welcome to the show, Phillip.
It's a pleasure being here, Jay. Nice to meet you.
Same here, Phillip. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about history's relevance in today's time and also about uncovering. But before discussing this, Phillip, just wanted to understand a bit more about you, your journey, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Okay, sure. I live in Haverhill, Massachusetts, in the United States. I've lived here pretty much my whole life. I went to college at UMass, University of Massachusetts Amherst. Then I got master's degrees at Lesley University in management. And then I got my master's in public history from American Public University when I was teaching. So I was in telecommunications for 22 years. Then the industry fell apart and I had to do something else. So I decided to pursue my love, which was history, and I became a history teacher. And I learned a lot. I really loved it. I was a high school history teacher for 10 years. And during that time, several of those years I taught local history, and they just kind of threw it at me. I didn't know much about the history of my own city, but I had to learn because I had to teach a whole semester of it. So I learned a lot. The history of my own city is very fascinating. So I fell in love with it. And during that time, as a project for my History of Haverhill class and for a club, a service organization, the Interact Club, which is part of Rotary International, I was their advisor. Me and my class wrote a book. We updated an old Haverhill, Massachusetts trivia book, and then we sold it through the Interact Club as a fundraiser, and it went very well. We also had the Key Club sell it, and it was probably one of the best raises I had done in the few years I had been there. So writing a book is now very easy. It's with a word processing machine and a printer, and with all the software out there. It's we had a great time. So I kind of got the bug for it. So I went on to do other fundraising books like Haverhill Sports Hall of Fame and Trivia book. And then for my master's in for public history, I did what's called an Arcadia publishing book, where they're local history books by a national or even international publisher. So I did mine. It was the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide, and we had a presenter giving a talk about it. And I thought, wow, this would be a good project for a capstone project for my master's degree. So I did it, and I had a co-author, an Armenian journalist from my city who knows everybody, and we did really well. It was, and that was about 2019 or so, or no, 2015. All right. So since then, my wife is Greek, so I did a book, The Greeks of the Merrimack Valley. I've also done some local books about local veterans who served in our nation's wars from the American Revolution up until, current times. So, some I've done just for other people, for fundraisers. Some I try to make a little profit of it, and I did it. It was just a lot of work. So, but I still love a good story, like most people. And history fascinates me. It's just probably because so little we know. And my readings over the past 10, 20 years are really filled me in on a lot of things that I wish I had known a long time ago.
Right, Philip. I can understand. I want to understand, why is history so fascinating in spite of us, moving so forward. from those events. Why is it so fascinating? Is it where we want to know more about those mysteries, or is it about we want to learn something out of it?
Well, I think it has meaning. It has to have meaning for it to hit you. Like whenever I started a course, a new topic, the kids don't care. So how do I make them care? Where's the so what? How do I connect it with people, my audience? And that's not always easy. But I try because the kids, they're bored. They're not as interested as adults because they don't have the background. So I try to make things interesting and relevant to the people. And that's where local news, making local history, that's where I make the connection with local history wherever possible. Between international and national events, I can connect a lot of international and global things to my own city, which because we were once the third largest shoe manufacturing city in the world, I think, at one time. So we have a lot of fascinating people who came from here, whether it's politicians or movie stars or you name it. We've had our share of famous people come and go through here. So that's what makes things interesting. But what makes things even more interesting is how far back we can go to find out how intelligent people were and the things that they were thinking even before they could even print. I think in India is a natural. Go into an old, the Vedas or Upanishads, or I mean, no, that's is that Muslim? I'm sorry. Go into some of the ancient, texts, and you'll see such wisdom. It's like, how could people be thinking that so long ago? And even then, it was being thought of even before they could print, for thousands of years. And it's just, I still can't get over that. I still find that amazing because, you watch the news today and people are, well, they're not that, let's say, knowledgeable. Yeah, I mean, some of history is so inaccurate because they just didn't take into consideration what people from what the Indians knew, or the Egyptians, or the Chinese. It's everything is so Eurocentric that when you peel back the onion, you find that wow, people have been kicking around some very intense ideas. They didn't know what a germ was, but boy, they had some really good thoughts about ethics and morals and so forth. So that's what fascinates me about history, is the thing that people have been able to do, um, and with very little. When so many people were just trying to get through the day, some people were thinking like way beyond everyday life. So uh, I think there's a lot to be learned there from the ancients. Always has been, and always will be. They were wrong about a lot of stuff, but you got to give them credit for what they had access to. They did pretty good.
Right, right, Philip. Do you think a lot of today's trying to understand history, people who are they have just zeroed down more on the Second World War to understand, and that is where they go back to, and then they come forward. Most of the writing also on Quora, so many things are centered around Second World War. What is your understanding? Will
I,
our sense of history only be about Second World War?
I've noticed that lately. I'm seeing more and more World War II and Nazi stuff, and I don't know whether it's because we just have information. Because I mean, think about it, we're getting more into the where we have more and more footage of real footage, and documentation. My own father fought in World War II, so it has a lot of appeal because not too that many generations away from it. It's shocking, certainly. But I understand your comment about there's too much World War II stuff, whereas World War One is very fast. It was ugly, the Great War. So there's a lot to be learned from World War One, but World War II was so shocking with the Holocaust and everything. I think it's and how much damage one person could do, even though it was really a lot of people. To blame it all on one person is not accurate. But I think people are learning a lot from it nowadays because there's so many. countries that are going, to right-wing extremism, that people are like making comparisons. We did that ourselves a couple of months ago. There was an Auschwitz exhibit in Boston, and we thought it was fascinating. Over several hundred exhibits. It told the story from the beginning, to the end, and I actually know some people who a family whose ancestors had escaped from Auschwitz, or were who was there, and or had family killed there. So it was very touching, to see this, and I wish we'd stayed longer. It was a very good exhibit. So, but I agree. There was so many other periods of history that deserve further exploration. That we should spread it out a little, because there's lots of good stories out there in every era.
Right. Do you think there is a bit of politicization of history than is required when people say, let's make America great again, and then it becomes almost like a political movement? What do people understand? They are talking of good history, bad history. What will people, yeah, the young generation, learn out of such debates that is happening in the political arena,
Yeah,
whichever side it is?
it's interesting you brought that up, because I just finished the book Lies My Teacher Told Me, about the problem with American history textbooks. And people really, they want to keep their kids away from the truth. All right. So they just, especially in America now, in certain areas especially, they don't want kids to hear about, racism and sexism and, poverty and all the things from the past. They don't want to, upset them. Well, I don't agree with that. I think America has a great story, in that, even though we've had all these problems, wars, slavery, oppression, and corruption, and all these things, we've always found a way to fight it, because of democracy. People, the good guys eventually win. So that's still, I still believe that. I'll always believe that, because that's how the nature of the truth. So if we can name an embarrassing era to America, I can show you plenty of documentation. There were people fighting that, all right, because they had the democratic rights to do so. I mean, whether it's grassroots, or if it was people, leaders in Congress, or a president, there was somebody. You name something that has embarrassed my country, I'll show you people who fought against it and eventually won. And that makes me proud to be in America. That's how democracy is supposed to work. Okay, it's not all lollipops and unicorns. It can be ugly, but sometimes the good, hopefully most of the time the good guys win. Good people. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely,
it's
Philip.
and that and there thereby goes the importance of history. I although teaching was very difficult for me, because I did it when I was older, and the kids are the behavior is has a lot to needs a lot of improvement. Let's put it that way. But the cell phones were a brutal battle every day, and I just got burnt out from it. And I feel bad about that, because history is so important. I can't imagine myself without my knowledge of history and politics and the things I've learned. When I look at the news, I see it from a much different perspective than people who haven't had my level of education and experience. So I hate to judge them, but it's sad. It's very sad. Education is so important, and I wish I had done better at it. That's why I still like to teach. I still like to substitute teach. I'm still writing books. I still plan on going out and doing lectures, and I like to learn, and I like to teach. So writing books and producing films is part of being a public historian. It's taking history that you think is interesting and important and showing it to the public instead of in a classroom setting. So whether it's a museum or an archive, or a library or a video, or something, it's that's one way to get history before the people, and let them make their own just opinions about what it means. Just try to be accurate, back it up with documentation, proof, evidence. There's so much out there, where that's important. One thing this book mentioned that was kind of scary towards the end: only 1 out of 5 American adults is going to be exposed to history after high school, whether it's a college class or whatever, and that's scary. That's not good.
Right.
um, it makes sense. I mean, I certainly understand it, but yeah, because a lot of my knowledge of history has come after high school or after college, and my own personal reading, or movies, or documentaries, or most of my personal reading was history. That's why when I decided to get out of telecommunications, if I was going to teach, it would be history, because that's what I love. That's what I read anyway, and I was able to pass the certifications very quickly.
Right, Philip. Right. And so now let's move on from from the U.S. and history towards a different sort of history about the story of Bina McLoughlin. How did you move from talking about Massachusetts and Merrimack Valley to a setting in Ireland? Help us understand that. How did
Well,
that work?
great question. I in about 2016, my son went to study overseas at the Dublin City University. He was a student, an undergraduate at Providence College in Providence, Rhode Island. So he went there, and I think it was the spring semester. So we went April, the spring vacation, to visit him. So we went to see him out in Dublin, and then he was still in school. So me, my wife, and my other son Danny, my wife Chrissy, and my son Danny went out to Galway. Went out to the West Coast, the Wild Atlantic Way they call it, and did some touring over there. And when we were in Galway, we went on a tour of the Connemara Loop, which is a very pretty area, very unspoiled, very. It was like almost like very rural, impoverished. I mean, they didn't have like electricity till the 50s or telephone service, and they still speak Gaelic Irish there as a first language. Some people. So we were taking a tour of the Connemara Loop, going through all these hills and farms and meadows with sheep and hills and sheep and hills, and driving around. And our all of a sudden, our van driver Joe pointed out a little cottage, abandoned cottage, and he said, "That's where the witch lived." And by the way, I go, "What witch?" And he goes, "Well, she used to call into the station, the radio station where he used to work at, and she used to tell stories, and she used to put curses on people, and they would get really sick, and people would beg her to take the curses off." And I just said, "Really?" And I don't like women being called witches, because I think that's sexist. It's caused a lot of problems in history, believe me. Referring to women as witches, and I live near Salem, Massachusetts, the Salem witch trials, where that was a whole different thing. That had nothing to do with witchcraft. That was just politics and greed and bad blood. So I don't like that term, but that's what people thought she was. But she was more than that. She was a poor shepherdess, all right. But she was very popular. She was a busybody. She knew everybody, and everybody knew her. And she was a character. She was single. She lived in a little farm cottage, no running water, electricity, and lived there her whole life, raising, animals and sheep and so forth, like a lot of people out there. But when she died, she left over $1 million to her local member of parliament, Eamon O'Keefe. And when the guy told me that Eamon O'Keefe was the grandson of Eamon de Valera, who's like the George Washington of the United States. I mean, he kind of started, the Irish Free Trade, the first president. And I was like, and I just read about that. I didn't know much about Irish history. I kind of read Irish history for dummies on the way over. And when I saw that, I was like, whoa, really? And and he didn't like that. He wound up giving the money back to the family or whatever. But I just couldn't get my mind off the story. It just stuck with me, because I love rural stuff. I grew up in a kind of rural area of my city, where a neighbor had a farm, and I used to work there, and we used to ride horses and take care of the cows and chase the ducks, or have the ducks chase us, or so I love the rural life. And farming, always have loved horses. I just, and then when I thought about this fascinating story about this elderly woman, poor farmer, it was like, what a great story. Why aren't there more? This is fascinating. I just couldn't get it out of my head. So I had fooled around with public access TV before. I had done specials or shows, sometimes kid shows, or just playing around like a hobby kind of thing. So I said, I got to make a film. I got to tell somebody this story. So I just couldn't get out of my head. So I decided to do a little uh, small, like 4 minute film, documentary film about it, and I showed it around, and it was okay, but it didn't just do it. I said there's more to this, so um, I decided that maybe I should spend more money, do a better film, hire some people out in Ireland, the directors and so forth, to help me out because I couldn't go back there because my schedule. So we wound up doing a longer documentary film I called the Queen of Connemara, The Extraordinary Life of Bina McLoughlin, which is on Amazon Prime Video. It's on Tubi. It's on a variety of different streaming channels. I think it's on YouTube. I just fell in love with the story. The video came out really well. I entered it into several film festivals. I won awards like at different film festivals around the world. Nothing top notch by any means, but enough that I felt like, yeah, okay, I did get recognition for a good little story here. And then I decided to write a book. So I wrote a book last year based on the film and the research I'd done. And a lot of people had contacted me with stories about her and photos. So I did the book, and as always, writing and producing is a lot easier than selling. When you can have the best story in the world, but if people don't know about it, what good is it? So um, always the problem is finding the money, to market it, promote it. And that's where my game was off, because I was hoping to get some sponsors, but I just didn't have the time to get out there and line them up. So what happened was I put it on a website called Film Hub, where they provide it to several different film distribution companies. And I never heard from that. Nothing ever happened until last month. I got a check out of the blue for like $500 for this film that was on a TV station I never even heard of. It's like out of the blue. It was like, wow, this is great. So I decided maybe I should put a little effort into it, and that's what brings me here today. Is okay. I didn't want to spend money on advertising because that could produce nothing. So, and that costs a lot of money. So I figured, let me look at podcasts. And AJ, you're my first podcast, and I've listened to many podcasts, especially history ones. But it's an honor being my first podcast with you in India, of all places. I've always loved Indian culture and history. Fascinates me. I used to teach the five religions, and Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and I really enjoyed it. I really get it, and it's one of the few things. It's one of the things I miss about teaching, is being able to share that information, because otherwise kids will never hear about it. A lot of kids don't even go to Sunday school. I mean, I was brought up Catholic. I mean, we weren't the most devout, but I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I had a chance to learn about that. So I have a love-hate relationship with religion, uh, but I still, my wife and I are, belong to a local church, and we go and we raised our kids Greek Orthodox. My wife is Greek, so it still has a role, and uh, I still like to learn about it and think about it and draw comparisons between the major religions, and I enjoy that. So, matter of fact, I heard about it in India. I didn't hear much about it. It's just that when people were shut in during COVID in India, a lot of them were watching TV shows based on old stories, like Ramayana and Krishna and from the Bhagavad Gita. There's old, I guess, and they kind of re-looked at some of these old values, and I just heard one story about that. I don't know the truth behind it, but I found it fascinating that these ancient tales still have meaning to people in this day and age. So I thought that was great.
Absolutely, absolutely, Philip. All good stories are for the humanity. Like God, in whatever way you want to see it, He is for the humanity. He or she, even all stories, good stories, are for everyone in this world. And whatever you have written in your part of the world, it is about another part of the world. But that goodness will spread is spreading to all parts of it, and that's what even all the documents that of the past or writings of the past is all about. Bhagavad Gita is not only about one person or few people or about just about India. It's a document which can be read and understood by different people at different times. Even Oppenheimer, as they said, he read about it, and then there is a debate whether he was actually talking during the Manhattan Project or after it, and then there is all this. But he also quoted at least one portion of the Gita about about all that. So a lot of different people have understood it in different manner, the same way we understand from every other book that is there. But I want to understand, if an India, someone in India or anywhere else wants to understand about Bina McLoughlin's story, how do the why is it important for them in that manner? How should they understand? Okay, this is a story which can inspire them, or in any manner.
Well, I look at the story of Bina from different perspectives. One is that, first of all, agriculture. All right, most people don't have much to do with agriculture anymore. So the idea of a woman spending her whole life in a little shack surrounded by animals with no
Right.
no hot water, no electricity, and still amass $1 million. It just doesn't make sense to people. People are totally disconnected from the rural agricultural life. And I'm so happy I had my exposure to that when I was a kid. I can't imagine not being like that. Um, you know, but also we don't have enough story about elderly women. I mean, my grandmother raised me because my mother was working, full time, owning a beauty salon, and you get a different perspective being around 70, 80-year-old people when you're a little kid than you do from your own parents. She was old school. I mean, she lived. She grew up. She was born in Italy in the late 1800s, and she lived through World War I, World War II, the Depression. All these things. She lost a child to one of her children to childhood leukemia. She had lived through the Spanish flu and saw all the people die from that locally. And when we look at the hardships we've had in our life, they were nothing compared to that. Yeah, so COVID, ruined a lot of us emotionally, and still recovering. And it's just a shame because we've had it fairly lucky in this country, at least people my age. So when you think of the importance of elderly women, especially how they kind of the matriarchs and get stuff done, and how little glory they get, even though in our hearts they're terribly important. I figured it'd be nice to see a story about an elderly woman, especially a single one. The actresses are always complaining that there's not enough roles for older women, and I agree with them, because most are it's easy for the 20 somethings or the 30 somethings to get the sexy roles and the romantic roles and everything, but there's not much for left over, and that's a shame. That's something I would like to see change. And there are also economic aspects of it. How did this woman amass all this money? And there's also comedy. I mean, she was a riot. She people used to love her uh, to come on the radio station and tell stories. I mean, because stories are crucial to understanding, and it's about how we communicate and how we get along and learn. They're ancient. They go way back before writing. It's to me, it's the basics of life are food, air, water, and stories. you know,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And she lived a simple life in spite of having so much of money, no show off, and wanted to contribute to the community.
right. She was very religious, very Catholic, but she knew. But if the church did something she didn't like, she would go after them. I remember one part of the thing that I admired about her was that they weren't letting the unbaptized babies, like stillborn babies and so forth, be buried in the church, the parish graveyard. And she protested that. That's horrible. Like, how can you do that? These were somebody's child, and she eventually won. She got her way. So I really admired her for that. So she stood up to people. She was very political. I think she was in the Fianna Fáil party, if I'm right, which is one of the Irish major political parties. So she campaigned a lot for Eamon O'Keefe, and that's why she liked him so much. I guess he was kind of like the American equivalent of a Democrat, or uh, so I found that interesting. So Eamon was very helpful. He gave an interview and for the film, and a lot of her friends, a lot of people who remembered her, gave interviews, and I think there's a bigger, better story out there. It's just these things cost money, and like even once you do all the production costs, then you got to sell it, then you got to do all the marketing costs, and it's not easy. But there's a lot of amateurs out there, and like me, and hoping to get their story out. And whether it goes anywhere or does anything, I don't know, but I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot. I have shown it locally, and people did appreciate it.
Of course,
So
a
that's
lot
what's
of
important.
people, a lot of people have come to know. I read some of the reviews even on Amazon, and I'm sure a lot of people will come with the efforts you are making for going on a few more podcasts and all. A lot of people will understand about Bina's story in different parts of the world, and through that, are you able to hear me? Yeah.
You're getting a little choppy.
Okay.
You're sometimes it's fine, and sometimes it's choppy. Your voice.
Okay. Okay. I hope it is better now.
I can't
Okay.
hear very well right now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can. Maybe it's some technical issue or whatever it is. But I
Okay.
think we have covered most of the thing. One final question, Philip, is now what other stories are you working on? How are you taking your story forward?
Oh, I have lots of stories. My most recent one is one thing I found out when studying my local city is that we have the first socialist mayor and city councilor in the country. And I heard that a long time ago. I was like, what? That makes no sense to me. But as I did my research, kind of found out the turn of the century, like 1898 to like the early 1900s, there was a socialist era in America where people were sick of the corruption, the poverty, the oppression, um, and they wanted to do something about it. So labor unions come into power. People started to talk about socialism because it's going on in Europe, and European immigrants are coming here with these ideas. And it just happens because we were a large industrial city, a manufacturing city, a shoe manufacturing city. We had a lot of labor, and we had unions and a lot of unrest, some strikes. And the city councilor came along. He was a shoe worker, and he ran for city council, and he won as a socialist. And then eventually, the mayor, John C. Chase, he won as a socialist mayor. And there were a handful of other socialists in the city council. And I thought, and they made a lot of improvements in the city. Okay, things that other administrations didn't want to spend money on, or they didn't want to upset, the big powers that be, like the railroads or the electric companies, who were very powerful at that time. So they did a lot of good. And it was because of the people that voted for them and worked for them and campaigned for them. And what's even more interesting to me, they served 1-year terms. All right. Now, this guy was very well liked, this mayor, John C. Chase, but they didn't vote for him for a third term because he just did not do it. It was just, okay, you've done your time. Next, so they set out what they wanted to do. He was popular. People liked him. It's just, you've done your time. And I was like, wow, I love that. That was great. There were no laws restricting him from running. There was no, um, anything to prevent him. I forget what's the word. But anyway, so I thought that was very interesting. And there's still some remnants of what they did in my city, things that they built. That even when the Republicans took back control of the city government, that they didn't change because they were so popular and people loved them. So and he wanted to do basic things like at the time the railroads were fighting having to raise the tracks above busy roads. And the state made it almost impossible for cities to get the railroads to elevate the tracks. But they fought for that. They also he wanted to put all the electrical wiring underground because at that time electricity was very new, and they wires used to fall down all the time, and people would get shocked. And he wanted to put them underground like they were doing in New York City because so many people getting electrocuted. But the electric companies didn't want to pay for it. So he fought. He didn't win. But if he had won, it would have saved a fortune down the road from storms and outages, because now we're doing it. Now we are putting new developments, the wiring underground. So he was like, they were ahead of their time. And thank goodness for it. So it's just a great story. I have the book out. Got to try to do a little, documentary film, just a very short one, maybe. I was working on a larger one, but it was someone else, but that kind of is in limbo now. I have that's the ebook is free. The Socialists of Sioux City, the Socialist Movement in Haverhill, Massachusetts. So that's free out there on many different websites. And hopefully a small documentary film about that.
Wonderful. There's much to learn from you, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you. So, what is the best way for them to do so, Philip?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably my I think I have Facebook. So Phillip Brown on Facebook, out of Haverhill, Massachusetts. My email is mrbrownhhs@gmail.com. You can also just Google me, obviously, and I'd be happy to speak with people, sharing their ideas and how my angle on things, and technology is making things much easier to do films. All this AI, I'm all over AI. It saves so much time. And I'd love to see a debate. I'd love to see more debates on the use of AI, because some people are very against it. Some people think it's like cheating, where I just see it as another tool, and it's not going away. It's like email. When email first came out, people were like, what's this? It's like, it's just too primitive. This is going to replace writing. And it did replace writing. Who writes letters anymore? Everything's text or emails. But it's not going away. And we got to learn how to use it. Because it's still all about your ideas and the meaning, and as far as the mechanics, all right, the computers can do the mechanics, and they can do a little research, but it's still the ideas that are important.
Absolutely, it's all about ideas, and it's all about stories. And one story you have told very well, and you are telling so many other stories. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Nice talking to you. Take care.
You too.